What lives in saltwater and freshwater, gobbles 200 pounds of seagrass a day, and calls elephants cousin? Stick around and you'll find out. Think about an endangered species. What's the first animal that comes to mind? If you're like most people, you probably thought of a rhino or a tiger or an elephant. But you don't have to go thousands of miles to find an endangered species.
Some of them are right here in the United States. They live in forests and lakes, deserts and streams. But I bet you didn't know one of the most endangered lives right here in the waters of Florida.
That's right, we're talking about manatees.
When you look at them, it's hard to believe that sailors once thought they were the mermaids of mythology.
But manatees aren't a myth, they're real and they're in trouble.
But how did these gentle giants end up in so much danger? And what's being done to save them?
Stick around while we find out.
A few facts about manatees. They're the only plant-eating marine mammals, and they have huge appetites. Most of the time, they tend to stay mainly in and around Florida, eating 32 to 108 pounds of aquatic plant life every day. They look pretty chubby, and there is a thick layer of fat under their skin, but it's not enough to insulate them against the cold. That's why they tend to hang out in the warmer waters of the South. But not always.
Some manatees have migrated as far away as Rhode Island. But I was curious, what do they do in the wintertime, and how big do they get?
I spent some time with a few manatee experts to learn more about these unusual creatures. You'll be amazed at what I found out.
The first expert I talked to was Dr. Dan Odell, a research biologist at Hub SeaWorld Research Institute, who took me to see the manatees in the rehabilitation area. He told me that manatees are from the order Sirenia, which includes the dugong from Australia.
There are three species of manatees. The West African manatee, which is of course in West Africa, the Amazonian manatee, which is in the Amazon River Basin, and the West Indian manatee, which includes the Florida manatee. The West Indian manatee ranges from roughly Florida in the north down to Brazil in the south throughout the Caribbean.
What other animals are manatees related to?
Manatees are related to elephants, hyraxes, and aardvarks. And if you just take the elephant and you look at an elephant that has very thick, tough skin, not much hair on it, some toenails, then you look at our friends the manatee here. It's very similar skin appearance, sparse hairs scattered over the body, and you see these very tiny fingernails.
I could see the resemblance, but unlike elephants, manatees have whiskery faces and little tiny eyes. Manatees can also stay underwater for as long as 20 minutes, diving down to feed no deeper than around 10 feet. Can you imagine an elephant doing that?
I noticed that they don't really swim that fast. About how fast can they swim?
Manatees in general are very slow swimmers, going 1 or 2 miles an hour. In a burst of speed, if they really have to, they may be able to get to 10 or 12 miles an hour, but not for very long.
Even though they're massive, there's something graceful about manatees. Waving their fan-shaped tails, they glide through the water like big gray blimps. They can grow to be over 12 feet long, and at their heaviest, weigh in the neighborhood of 3,500 pounds.
Big manatees are probably as long as a mini pickup truck and probably weigh as much, or if not more in some cases, as a small pickup truck.
For an animal that eats a lot of lettuce, which is known to be a very healthy food, how did they get so fat?
Manatees have large, long intestines, lots of microorganisms, bacteria, that break down the plant material, release the nutrients. The manatees absorb it all and really turn it all into fat.
Because manatees only eat plants, they have different adaptations from other marine mammals like whales or sea lions. Adaptations like their teeth, for instance.
As they chew, even though it doesn't look like it here, the forces generated during chewing make the teeth move forward. And the manatees and one species of kangaroo do that. They move to the front, they're resorbed, and they fall out. They're known as marching molars by some people. And it goes on, as far as we know, as long as manatees live.
It's no wonder manatees go through so many teeth. Look how much they eat. I figured that couldn't be good for the environment, but I was wrong.
Manatees have a very important role in the coastal marine and freshwater environments by recycling nutrients. A big manatee may eat 100 or 200 pounds of vegetation every day, as long as it lives, which could be up to 50 years in some cases, and that makes a lot of fertilizer back into the water. So manatee really helps keep the ecosystem intact in a very dynamic state.
Makes sense to me, but if manatees are important to the environment, why are they endangered?
Manatees are endangered because of people. Historically, if we go back a few hundred years, people have eaten manatees. These days in Florida, it's not so much hunting, which is rare but still happens on occasion. It's other human activities. Their habitat has been severely impacted by human activities in Florida, and other things like boating. A large number of manatees are killed each year by power boats. They get entangled in fishing gear, they get caught in flood control dams. So it's other human things that are keeping manatees on the endangered list.
So, I wondered, how many manatees are left in Florida?
These days, the state of Florida tries to do a complete survey of state waters every winter when the weather's really cold and the manatees tend to congregate at warm water areas. They've counted over 3,000 manatees in some years.
Dr. Odell says that nobody really knows how many manatees are left, but if things don't change, they'll be on the endangered list for some time to come. And that would be a shame for an animal that's been around for millions of years.
Surprised? You shouldn't be. Manatees have been around a long time. Fossilized bones have been found that date back to 45 million years. They're very adaptable, but nowadays changes happen so fast in their habitat that they don't have time to adjust. Luckily, though, they have scientists, wildlife officials, and facilities like SeaWorld on their side. For over 20 years, a variety of government and private organizations have been working hard to rescue, rehabilitate, and release hundreds of orphaned and injured manatees. It's always been rewarding, but it hasn't always been easy. So, how do they do it? I mean, what does it take to rescue a gentle giant? It takes a lot of teamwork and a lot of heart. Check it out. When it comes to manatee rescues, Barbara Ramirez has seen it all. She loves her work, and it shows.
It's very exciting. You have a manatee that's hurt out in the wild, and you're trying to help it out.
It's not something you can do alone. It takes a lot of agencies to get the job done.
The very first agency is going to be the Florida Marine Patrol. That is the first people they are going to call. The Florida Marine Patrol is going to call the FWC, the Florida Wildlife Commission. They're going to be the ones that go out there. They're going to assess this manatee's problems.
Animal care, this is Elena.
They are the ones who call us and let us know, yes, this manatee needs to be rescued.
There's no time to lose. The entire team scrambles, and the beach van speeds to the rescue. Once on site, the team quickly assesses the situation and works out the rescue strategy.
We also have to be careful of moms and babies in there. If it's a mom with a baby, we always take both of them. We don't ever want to separate a mom from a baby.
As soon as the plan is set, they move in, circle the manatee, and pull it in.
Once we have the manatee there, what we need to do is transfer the manatee onto a stretcher. Some manatees we have rescued weigh close to 2,000 pounds, and that's a lot of weight.
Let's go a little bit more.
We go ahead and load the manatee up into the beach emergency van. That's when the veterinarian takes over.
A lot of the time, the doctor who goes along is Dr. Michael Walsh, Director of Veterinary Services at SeaWorld Orlando.
The goal is to get that animal as quickly as possible into the truck, get them transported. We may do initial blood work on site, we may try to do an initial evaluation, but we're going to rely on what we can do back here to really complement what we do in the field.
The vets look for visible wounds or signs of blunt trauma from boats. There may be a crab trap line around their flipper, sometimes they get entangled in discarded fishing line. Whatever the problem is, manatee experts like Pedro Ramos are quite often part of the solution.
On the ride, we monitor the manatee, we monitor the respirations, we keep him wet so that his skin doesn't dry out. If he has some injuries that can be cleaned out, the veterinarian and the staff will start cleaning out the wounds. If not, it's simply a matter of monitoring the manatee.
Once the manatees arrive at the rehabilitation facility, the next step is to move them into the pool. But wait a second, if manatees are so heavy, how is that possible?
Well, usually what we'll do is put them into that pool.
1, 2, 3.
And depending on the size of the manatee, we actually have a crane. If it's a smaller manatee or if it's the baby manatees, we basically just hand carry them in the stretcher. We just put the stretcher in there and they swim right out of the stretcher.
Once the manatees are settled into their new home, the veterinarians run all kinds of tests to make sure they find any hidden problems. It's all in a day's work for these brave, dedicated animal paramedics. The whole SeaWorld rescue team is determined to save as many lives as possible, and they're succeeding.
As you can see, these dedicated animal experts have got rescuing manatees down to a science. After some life-saving care, they'll be on the road to recovery. The goal is to return rehabilitated manatees to the wild. The study of these animals may also help bring the endangered manatee back from the brink of extinction. So, how do you nurse an injured manatee back to health?
After a thorough examination, the next step in treating injured manatees is to take x-rays and perform minor surgery like suturing wounds and repairing fractures. To reduce trauma during treatment, the manatees are placed in special pools with hydraulic floors that lift the animals out of the water. The veterinarians face all kinds of manatee injuries, from damaged tails to deep cuts from propeller blades. But one of the worst and most difficult to treat is blunt trauma from boat collisions.
We've had manatees that have come in with a collapsed lung, and what happens is the front of the boat will hit the manatee on the side, it'll fracture a rib, and the rib will actually puncture the lung. It basically deflates the lung, and so they turn on their side.
To help them compensate or to help control that, what we've developed is a special type of wetsuit that we wrap all the way around the manatee, and we put in pieces of foam on whatever side is down underwater. And what that does is it brings that side of the manatee back up and it helps them float right.
We actually see one side higher than the other, and when it's like that, they can't eat. And the way to get them to eat is to stabilize them and right them back up in their normal position, and these jackets can help do that. So it's a constant learning process all the time. We're always modifying, always changing. So you've got to be open to innovation, changes, what's new in the field to make the problems approachable.
Dr. Walsh and the other vets who work with manatees have faced a lot of unique challenges over the years.
The first challenges we faced are we had to learn how to sedate them without hurting them. We then had animals that needed surgery, so we had to work out general anesthesia, which was totally different for us. We had to figure out medications, and then we had to figure out the use of diagnostic techniques like ultrasound.
They also use a technique called thermography to diagnose internal problems. Thermography uses a heat-sensitive camera to scan the manatee's body in search of hot spots that indicate possible infection or trauma.
What we're seeing here is a person's hand, which is much hotter because it hasn't been in water, pointing down to an infection in the flipper of the manatee.
Even with all their advanced medical technology, manatee vets often have to use their professional intuition and experience from working with other species.
Once a manatee starts doing better, we'll let them out of the medical pool and put them into the isolation pool.
The isolation pool is set up so the rehab crew can monitor the manatee's progress and help them make the transition to eating on their own.
manatees feed on the surface and they feed on the bottom. So just dropping the lettuce in the water, it's gonna float, so that takes care of that. But we need to somehow get it on the bottom. And Barb has some lettuce tubes over here that we've made. You can see it's just like a PVC tube, and all we've done is cut out an opening in it, and we put this weight on it. So what we're gonna do is slide the lettuce heads into the tray, and we'll just put it in the water, and then that'll sink it.
One manatee can go through 100 pounds of lettuce a day. At that rate, they'll be ready for release in no time.
Saving a full-grown manatee has its challenges, but just imagine taking on the responsibility of saving a 45-pound orphan baby.
Light, easy to move, no problem. Except, what do you feed it? You can't exactly go to the grocery store and pick up a case of manatee calf formula, so you create your own. And that's exactly what SeaWorld veterinarian Dr. Mike Walsh did for Pistachio, another baby manatee.
Pistachio was an orphan manatee. He was found in the Daytona Beach area. State biologists were observing him for a couple of days.
They were pretty sure the baby had been abandoned. No large adults were in the area and no females were coming by. It's possible the mother fell victim to natural causes. Nobody really knows. The important thing was to take care of this helpless little manatee.
Pistachio came in as a tiny baby in the 40-pound type range. Now that's pretty small. Babies like this are born between usually 50 and 100 pounds, so he was even underweight for when he came in.
Getting manatees to their optimum roly-poly weight isn't as easy as it sounds. Most manatees come in dehydrated, so that's the first problem to solve.
And once he came in, we x-rayed him, we got weights on him, and we started tube feeding him.
We give him what's called a gruel substance, and that is like a spinach. It's ground up spinach and romaine lettuce and water. You go ahead and pump that into the manatee. I can guarantee you, again, about 99% of the manatees that come in here are gonna have that done.
In between tube feedings, they train Pistachio to accept the bottle. Raising any baby is a 24/7 job, with feedings every 2 hours. And Pedro has plenty of experience with that. He's been a manatee foster parent more than once.
Oh my goodness. Come on down, there you go. Let's get you into position. Flippers down. We've been working on him pretty much round the clock, and he's understanding how to take the bottle. He's just learning now where to come over to get his bottles. That's why we slap the side of the pool. That lets him know that it's feeding time, and he'll come right over. It's kind of like ringing the dinner bell for him.
We like to get them up to 700 pounds. And the reason for that is when they go out into the wild, they have to be able to endure the cold weather during the winter. And that winter weather is a challenge to them if they're not nice and plump.
In Pistachio's case, the standard bottle mixture didn't work, so a new formula was created. The big question was, would it be enough to save him?
Well, Pistachio's formula was designed based on a couple of things. We know the babies can come down with intestinal problems. And prior to Pistachio, about half of the babies were lost with a type of disease process called pneumatosis intestinalis. What that is that you get air in the wall of your intestinal tract and it becomes dysfunctional. It just won't work. It can't pass food, it can't absorb food. And we knew that we didn't want to lose him like we'd lost some of the others, so we got on the internet and tried to find a new treatment.
Dr. Walsh got lucky. He found a treatment that somebody used in Ireland on a human with the same disease. It's called an elemental diet.
We got around the disease problem by using this dietary approach. So he had a very severe case of this disease, and yet he survived. We're batting 1,000 now, where we used to bat 500.
Rehabilitation can take a few days or a few years. In Pistachio's case, he stayed in the baby pool for about a year. When he was big enough and eating some lettuce on his own, he was moved to the main exhibit, Manatees, the Last Generation.
The important thing about that part of the rehabilitation process is that we have adult manatees there, and that's where he's going to start learning to really be a manatee. So far, all of the contact he's had has been with us, but we need him to know that he's a manatee and how to act.
It's all part of preparing an orphan for release. To survive in the wild, Pistachio had to be mentally and physically ready. Thanks to the dedicated team at SeaWorld, he was.
He came in small, alone, and malnourished, and after 3 years of loving care, he left huge, healthy, and ready to join his own kind. That's not the only success story. Since 1976, SeaWorld has rescued over 250 manatees and released over 100.
After months of planning, the release team waits for a cold front to move across Florida. Manatees migrate to warmer waters when the temperatures drop. When that happens, the release operation is set into motion. It's hours of wet, exhausting work, and it's worth every minute.
So how do you decide when a manatee is ready to be released? According to Dr. Walsh, you have to look at a lot of things.
If they had some abnormality on x-rays like Pistachio did, then we'd recheck his x-rays, make sure it's cleared, make sure his blood work was all normal, and see whether or not size-wise he could go back out without any challenges from the wild.
When the manatee is ready, a whole team of experts gets together to figure out where and when to release it.
Everybody sits down together, agrees on a date, when to release him, what would be better, whether it's in the spring or in the fall, and we also decide where to release him.
But the final decision is up to the Florida Wildlife Conservation Commission and officials like Nicole Adamy.
Releases are very dependent upon the individual manatee themselves. The site is chosen depending on where the animal came from. What we try to do is we try to pick up and release the animal where the animal was rescued from.
And other times we have to take them far away because the area we rescued them from is really what got them into trouble in the first place.
Weather plays a big part in choosing when to release the animal. If the manatee was rescued as a baby, it needs to be released in the wintertime at a warm water site where it'll have plenty of company. It's also important because the cold weather will force the manatee to stick around long enough to remember the site next winter.
Just prior to the release, what we'll do is, of course, take the last of the blood samples for last-minute confirmation that the manatee's okay. We get a weight on them, and all of this is mostly just for records for the state because after we release them, we'll go back periodically and check up on them.
When the big day arrived for Pistachio, he was ready, but it was still hard to see him leave.
You become attached to them. You have this baby that was only a few days old when they brought him to us, and you see him go through a really tough time where you thought you were going to lose him, and he pulls through that until you finally get to the day where he has to go home. Going on a release is a really good feeling. You see a manatee that was in very serious condition, sometimes almost dead, and you've nursed them back to health. Most of the times, it's just a happy feeling and you let them go and you wish them well. The ones that are a little bit harder to let go are the orphans that you hand raise, like Pistachio.
Over the next year, the state keeps tabs on the manatee with a tracking device, a kind of pinging radio transmitter. That way, they can monitor where the manatee goes and how it's doing. Some manatees are so badly injured that they can never return to the wild, so they go to special habitats for long-term rehab. But whether they're released or stay at SeaWorld, it's the caring part of animal care that's most rewarding. Watching a healthy manatee like Pistachio swim away into its natural habitat is the happy ending everyone hopes for.
After a period of time, he started moving out from the spring area and went out into the river that connected to the spring, and then moved up and down, hopefully eating well. It's a good feeling when you're there to see him go.
It's a really good feeling because you know that you've succeeded, you know you've done your job.
Pistachio is one lucky little manatee.
I wouldn't exactly call him little, but Pistachio is lucky. He got exactly the right care at the right time from his dedicated friends at SeaWorld. And now he spends his winters in the warm waters of Blue Springs doing what manatees do. You can be a friend of manatees too. Learn all about manatees and their habitat. Support groups who are establishing refuges and encouraging people to act in a manatee-friendly way. Maybe if we all work together, we can save the manatee.
Pistachio is a wonderful success story, from the creation of his special formula to his ultimate release. But not every manatee is so lucky. Many are lost to illness or injuries. Some are even permanently disabled and can't go back to the wild. But the ones who can prove that sometimes rescue, rehabilitation, and release is more than a new beginning for these gentle creatures. It can mean a new beginning for the entire species. So, what can you do to help?
What can you do to help preserve the manatees? Well, actually, there's a lot.
Don't put stuff into the water that's not supposed to be in there. If you have old fishing lines, make sure you take those and throw them away properly.
There's a lot of organizations out there that are involved in manatee conservation, and you can always get involved with one of those. You just get on the internet and look, and you can find them.
You can support education projects, you can support research projects. All those things do help the plight of the manatee.
You can be a safe boater. Obey all the speed and wake zones on the waterways.
We just need people to abide by the rules that are out there. You know, slow down where we know that there are animals, for sure. It gives them a chance to hear the boat. It gives them a chance to move out of the way.
Manatees are totally surrounded by boats. There's over 1 million of them on Florida waterways. Just imagine being on a street with that many cars.
There are so many boats around that having a boat around is normal. What is not normal is to have that boat at 50 or 60 miles an hour skip over their line of transfer, intersect where they're going, and hit them before they have a chance to react.
That's the whole idea behind the manatee caution zones, and that's why we need to support legislation to protect manatees and all our wildlife.
I think it's important that we just educate ourselves about wildlife in general. We want them to stay wild, and that is one of the best things we can do to help an animal out.
Pierce.
You can also help other people learn more about manatees by sharing what you know, and you can support the people who actually rescue manatees. One way to do that is to let them know if you see an animal in distress.
The best thing anyone can do when they see an animal is to call and report it right away. Either Florida Marine Patrol or call the Conservation Commission's hotline. And then to go and wait there until someone comes on site. And not to touch the animal, not to approach the animal, but wait for a professional or someone who's trained. They can not only injure themselves, but also injure the animal as well.
If you live in Florida, helping manatees can be as simple as buying a manatee license plate. A lot of the money goes to research projects around the state. You can make donations to organizations like Hub SeaWorld Research Institute. And if you don't live in Florida, you can support local aquariums and wildlife parks.
We have some manatees that were rescued, and due to their injuries, they can't go back. When the public comes through the park and they see these manatees and they see the injuries that they have, it makes them aware of the problems that they have.
One of the things that we need to always keep in mind with an endangered species is that it never really ends. Even if that animal's numbers improve slightly, they're never out of trouble because we're constantly chipping away at what they need to survive.
So it's up to us working with the public, the federal agencies, and the state to actually get to where we prevent the injuries rather than trying to come back and treat them.
I think one of the best things we could do is just think about what we're doing today, because it definitely has an impact on what happens tomorrow.
Sadly, the things that make manatees most adorable, their childlike curiosity and slow-moving, gentle nature, also make them vulnerable. It's hard to imagine our world without these amazing animals, but it could happen.
It's up to all of us to protect them, and not just manatees, all animals. Even the ones in your own backyard. And it's so easy. Start a neighborhood environmental club. Recycle. Boat slowly through waters where manatees live. And be careful about what you trash. Something that seems as harmless as a plastic bag can mean serious trouble for wildlife.
So let's all do our part to protect these amazing animals, and maybe they'll be around for another 45 million years.
Because if they win their fight for survival, we all win.